Welcome to the Eyes Up Mindset podcast, where we explore what it means to grow daily and find our best in every aspect of life.
Welcome back to another episode of the Eyes Up Mindset podcast. I am John Shirky here with my friend and co-host, Jamie Wagner. Jamie, you're looking great today. Excited to see you as always.
I appreciate that. I randomly cut myself on my nose with a pencil. I don't know how that happened. I have no idea, actually. It happened, man.
It's, we're recording this first day of school. Things happen. First day of school, you're back teaching a little Spanish online. How'd it go today? First day of school.
Little weird. I'm teaching online, which is different, obviously, but just some little kinks that are going to get worked out kind of in every scenario. I go back to our first couple of podcast episodes and go, man, 5 months in, the things I know now compared to the things at the beginning. And so I'm going to imagine 2 weeks from now, all that stuff will be figured out, or 2 days from now, potentially. So some sound issues, some I don't know. It's just little stuff. It'll get figured out.
Always things to figure out no matter what you're doing. So
no question.
Couple of things. We have a little bit of a longer episode today, so shorter intro here, but a couple of things. Check us out on Facebook. Join our Facebook group. Check us out on social media. It's all Eyes Up Mindset stuff. We love having new people interact with us. I just told you before we hit record here, apparently we're big internationally right now, getting a lot of followers from the UK, which is surprising and exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool.
We love the UK. I've been over there a couple times, just briefly.
Who knew Eyes Up Mindset was going international as quick as it did, but
we're excited.
Yeah. So speaking of school, first day, our conversation today is with a repeat guest, our first ever, Tom Lutke.
He was our first guest and our first repeat guest. Big deal.
But he's a teacher. So I was trying to make the connection for you. I'm not as skilled at those transitions, but again, one of those things we're going to get better at. Tom is a teacher, but he's way more than that, and why he's such a close friend of ours and such a big impact on our lives.
Yeah, Tom was our episode number 3, and he was on a bike tour of the country and was going on a bike tour of the country. We catch up with him about that, about a whitewater rafting trip in the Grand Canyon, about how school's going, kind of where life is at. And it's just an awesome conversation.
If you haven't listened to the first one, I would encourage you go back. It's episode 3. Go back, listen to it. Some of the stuff's going to make more sense. But if you don't have time to do that, this one still is just as entertaining. And there's really good challenges as far as our mindset and what it means to live eyes up.
Yeah, I love talking to him. I wish we could have talked to him for hours and hours and hours on end, and you did because you were hanging out with him, and I was a little bit envious of that. But at some point, you just got to say, okay, that's enough. We've talked plenty, but it was just great to catch up with him and to see him and to hear how he's doing.
Enjoy, Tom Lutke. And welcome to the Eyes Up Mindset podcast. Welcome back, I should say.
Welcome back. That's right. Rotating co-host. It's been a while.
Probably too long, actually.
Probably a little too long. I've been listening to a bunch of your podcasts, and I'm a little nervous now. You've got some real deal guests coming on here that are way above my pay grade.
Yeah, but you were the original, so you have them all beat right now.
I've been real impressed with what you guys have been doing. It's very cool.
Well, I appreciate that. Before we get too far into it, though, if you haven't heard Tom's first interview, it's episode number 3. I would recommend stopping right now, going back, listening to that one first, because we're going to ask some follow-up questions regarding some of the things that we talked about in that episode. So go check it out. It's worth your time to go back. Tom, you mentioned you've been listening. What's something that you have taken away from the podcast, or what's an episode that you really, felt good about, or you took something out of?
Hands down, so far, my favorite is your interview with Rob Lovejoy. and he was talking about a few different things. One, different leadership styles and things like that. And then he was just talking about his disgust um, for complaining without action, or I mean, he put it way, way cooler than that. But
ideas without action are worthless.
Yes, yep. And yeah, I listened to that one. I was really impressed, and I just walked away just questioning um, a lot of things on the way I lead, and in a classroom sense, and the reasons why I was there. And it was good. They were all good questions, and kind of they came for me really at the right time. I listened to it shortly before school went back into session, and we're entering into a kind of a strange school year. And so to listen to that and just kind of for me to be able to remind myself of why I'm there and what the purpose and why I love that job so much. And just make sure.
So speaking of your job, if you haven't listened to episode 3, what do you do, Tom? Where are you at right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a high school teacher in Summit County, Colorado, right outside of Breckenridge, Colorado. So, amazing location, amazing school, and strange year. And our students they've been so awesome coming back to school this year. And I think students and staff, we've all realized that we love being there, and it was really hard to not be there last spring, or that'd be spring. Yeah, spring.
It's crazy. It feels like forever ago, and yet it's not that long ago. Like the first time you were on was 4+ months ago. Like, to think about us in retrospect, John, thinking about doing this for 4 months doesn't feel possible in some ways because it's gone so fast.
Right.
And yet, like you said, Tom, there's been some amazing guests and some things that challenge us, and we walk away asking questions like, what am I doing? And I think you reflected a goal of ours. And I think every single episode, I do the same thing. I think, we get to interview before the episode goes out. And so I get a little bit of time to chew on it before it ever walks out the door. But there's just these things that I'm like, man, what am I doing to lead better? What am I doing in my relationship with my wife? What am I doing as a person to grow and get better? And then you talk about like being in a school setting. Like, how do you reflect that to your students? How do you give that away in a way that they can see that this is a process for you also? Because I think so many of us in leadership roles are like, it can't be seen that I'm struggling. It can't be seen that I'm not doing well. How are you able to express that and reflect that back?
Definitely for this year, I think just being completely honest with them, like you just being real about it. I just told them when we got back. I told them how much I missed my classroom. I told them how much I missed, teaching. But most of all, I told them, what I miss is these interactions when we're all together as a class and we're having discussion and all those things. And so I just told them, and I think it's, maybe not all the kids are going to express it, but it's a different feeling this year. And I feel like there's a new appreciation for, the ability to go into school and for kids to be around their friends. And like they value it more this year, it feels like. And so I just really hope we can continue being like that. And for our school, we're in like a hybrid schedule. So I'm only seeing half my kids. My classes are 8 kids. So you can kind of skip right into getting to know each kid better than we've been able to do in past years. And I think that's, that's a blessing in this whole curse. And so we need to make the most out of that while we have it. And so I think just getting right into we call it real talk, just get right into real talk. Don't worry about, we're talking this year about, let's do what's essential. What's the most important things that you do in your job, and let's make sure we're doing that. And so I've been given permission to kind of wave off all the stuff that we've done just because somebody at some point said we had to do it. I don't have to stand up there and go over my syllabus. I just tell the kids, hey, if you want to see the syllabus, here's where it's posted. Let's go. Let's get to know each other, and let's move into things where we can have real discussion.
So it sounds like relationally and community building and connection, this model, certainly you see some incredible value in and some cool potential to continue to build on this. I think the academic side of it, I think, is yet to come, how it's going to impact kids academically. I don't know that. But you mentioned talking about your leadership style and listening to the podcast and saying, hey, how am I leading? What am I doing going into this year? What sorts of things came to mind, or what challenged you to maybe change some things that you were doing? Or what were you looking at changing that you kind of convicted you, like, hey, I should consider doing this differently or better?
There was a sometimes when you're listening, it's just you're thinking of so many scenarios. And one of the things that I think was said was talking about, understanding the why and putting out the why. And so I kind of had to remind myself of that. What is the why? Why am I there? Why am I in that role? And so, for me, it is those personal connections. It's, having, the ability to get to know these groups of students and trying to get them to realize their full potential and whatever that does. And, I don't, all my classes are not the most serious classes. So I teach, for part of the year, I teach ski tuning, which is amazing. And it fits with our economy and our community, but it's not the most serious class in the world, but there is still so much value that can be built out of that. And I think I just had to step back and look at it because I had people say to me, like, hey, this year's going to be weird for you. Just remember, it's just a job. And I kind of had to look at that and go, that's true. It is my job, and it is, what pays my bills, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that with when you're talking about kids' lives and the amount of time we spend with them. And, you're not going to have huge influence on every single one, but, if you can have some influence on a few of them, then man, that can make a huge difference in the world. And I don't know, it's an important job. And it just seems like I've been caught in the middle of, if you watch the media now, all of a sudden my job isn't about education. My job is about restarting the economy. If I'm not at work, then the economy can't restart. And I just need to remind myself is like, hey, I'm not just a babysitter. I'm not just an economy restarter. I'm there for a reason, and I love being there. So it's more than just a job for me.
You said something really important, and I think you need to know this from our interactions with people that have listened to your episode. You said, as a teacher, I'm not going to reach everyone, but if I reach a few and in an important way, it's a big deal. And the responses that we've got from your episode have been overwhelmingly positive, and people have been encouraged by the words that you brought and said, hey, I'm going to open myself up to this. And so your impact is not just in that context either. You've had an impact on our listeners, and it's why we brought you back. I think it's because a lot of people enjoyed the conversation and hearing about taking some risk and going out there and doing some things that are uncomfortable for you. So from us, thank you. And like knowing that you have a role is a huge deal. And I have to remind myself of that with the podcast also. Is like, that's our goal. It doesn't matter if we reach everyone. It doesn't matter if we have this huge audience. It matters that one or two people, and hopefully more than that, but one or two people take something valuable from it. And that's our job, you know?
Well, and I think beyond that, regardless of what role you are impacting people. So it doesn't matter if you're a podcaster or a teacher or, you know, painting lines on the road. It doesn't matter. You are impacting people. So remembering that what you do is valuable to people, and to not sell yourself short. You're impacting people. So, you know, do whatever it is that you're doing to the best of your ability.
I thought you guys brought me back because you have video now and you wanted to have everybody see my good looks.
Well, that is true. That is true. Although you don't have the same sunglasses on you had last time. We were trying to describe them, but, you know, maybe next time you come on, you can have those queued up.
You know, we're out on a trip right now and I don't have my bike, and those are solely my biking sunglasses. So it's a poor excuse, but it's all I've got.
And we were really hoping for the fish with the American flag t-shirt or whatever it was that you had on, just, you know, so people could get a sense of things. But
The sense of, hey, this guy doesn't change his clothes.
So, Tom, you're out on a trip. Where are you at? What are you doing?
I am currently in Wheatland, Wyoming. I'm out with you, John.
Weird. We're together.
We are together. Well, we're not currently together. You're sitting in a really lush meeting room inside of a hotel, and I'm sitting inside of a short bus in the parking lot.
But it's your short bus, Tom.
It's my short bus. It is my home away from home. I love it. And we're out just enjoying the weekend, Labor Day weekend. It's been gorgeous here. We've been out water skiing and wakeboarding on the Glendo Reservoir, and yeah, it's been incredible. A nice little getaway already. You know, school just started and we already get our first little vacation. So we feel like we're making the most of it for sure.
How long you been back at it for school?
The students came back on the 26th of August. So we've only had one full week. So yeah, just a week and a half, and we're definitely figuring things out as we go.
Talk to some of my teacher colleagues and they're like, I don't know which way is up right now. Do you feel that way?
No, I don't actually. And I thought I was going to, and I feel like our school has done a really good job of putting in place a system that is the best scenario for the situation that we have right now. And so, I felt that way. Absolutely getting ready and trying to think of what this was going to be like and try to prepare and all that stuff. And the second that the kids start walking into your room and, you know, you start laughing with them, and that's when it's like, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. Excuse me. So no, I'm feeling, you know, it's different and it's a lot of work in other ways, but those interactions with students is still the same.
So, Tom, you're back at work, but I want to take us back a few months. You know, when we first interviewed you, you were on your way to another extreme adventure. You were on your way to do 1,000 miles on your road bike from Santa Fe, New Mexico to somewhere near St. Louis, between St. Louis and Chicago. Give us a little update. I mean, now you've had a few months to process that. I mean, we're going to have additional follow-up questions, but like, how far did you make it? You know, and kind of overall impressions of what you did.
Yeah, well, I did it. I made it 1,000 miles. I don't think I went.
How many days?
13 days, 13, kind of 14 days out, but 13 days of actual riding. For some reason, I had not done the math. I thought 1,000 miles from Santa Fe would take me somewhere near Chicago, was like 500 miles off. Don't worry, I teach geography. So I ended up in a small town called Cuba, Missouri, kind of getting towards St. Louis. And
hey, Tom, I saw 3 trucks that are federal agents just roll into the parking lot. Are they looking for your short bus?
I sure hope not. I don't. Is that real?
That's real talk.
Look. Hold on. Now, quick question. I noticed this morning, I looked at my parking job. 2 of my tires are hanging over into a handicap spot. Do you think that they would call federal agents for a bad parking job?
It seems like overkill, but I don't know. I mean,
Let's be honest, there's not a ton going on in Wyoming right now. So they may be getting the National Guard out here for bad parking. It seems like they're just driving around slowly, and if they were looking for a yellow short bus, it's pretty easy to spot.
Fair.
So
maybe they're not looking for you, so we should be good.
We'll find out. We'll find out.
All right. On the lookout, though. Continue on. Where'd you end up? Where were you?
So yeah. We started in Santa Fe. I ended up in Cuba, Missouri, is where I went my separate ways, and my wife scooped in the bus and picked me up and took me back home. So I think overall reflections, I loved it. I hated it. Some of it was easy. Some of it was incredibly hard. I was frustrated. It was beautiful. I don't know. I don't have an overall impression because it was 13 days and many of the days were very different. But it was tough. Not as much physically is what I thought. After 7 days or so, you just kind of start pedaling. But mentally it was kind of hard of like, I don't know, I'm kind of sick of riding my bike and we can't stop. So I guess we'll just keep going. But then I was thinking about it this morning. I can still close my eyes and picture some of the hills that we rode down, or like we missed a Walmart that we were trying to go to, rode down like this big grassy hill, and our bikes were fully loaded down. And so I can still picture all these little spots, and it was incredible. I'm really glad that I did it, for sure. But what I'd like to just to give you an intro, I'd like to just share with you what day one was like. So I roll into Santa Fe. We spend the night in a hotel. We leave the hotel the next morning, I think at 5 a.m. So we're riding out of Santa Fe, and the sun is coming up, and it's just stunning. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what it's going to be like. Just picturesque, looking around. There's no vehicles on the road yet. And I'm like, I'm in love with this already. And about 5 miles later, Joe's riding behind me, and he clips my back tire and crashes into a ditch. And I'm like, oh boy, I see I've already ruined their trip. Joe's in a ditch. Oh man. So he gets up, he dusts himself off, he's fine, and we're good to go. And like 10 minutes later, a dog runs out and is like attacking at Cheryl's back wheel. And I'm like, what's happening? There's dogs attacking us now. And like the dog kind of runs off. Nobody gets bit. And I'm like, oh man, that was chaos. Well, I guess, this day can only go up from here. So we keep riding. And then somebody waves and like starts like pumping their fist. And I've ridden like 10 miles at this point. And I want to pull over and explain to him like, hey, you don't have to pump your fist for me. I've only ridden 10 miles. It just looks like I have a lot of stuff. But apparently we didn't have time for that, so I kept going. So we keep riding. Another dog comes out, attacks Cheryl again. I don't know what it is. Found out all dogs hate Cheryl, and she's just getting she's just getting attacked like every 10 miles. And I'm like, this is not good. So we keep cruising. And our plan is to go 60 miles that day. They're like, we'll start it out easy on you. We'll take you 60 miles. So we ride in. We're coming down this big hill, and there's a speedway. And the speedway is kind of like our stop. That's the 60-mile mark. And then there's going to be a campground in that town somewhere that we got to find. Town. It was just a gas station. So we're heading towards the speedway. Those two pull in. I'm a little bit back. So one of them stops. So I know that they pulled in to the speedway. The other one crashes in. Cheryl ends up flying off her bike, dislocating her finger. She's like yelling across the whole gas station. Everybody's looking. They grab her finger, pop it into place right there in the parking lot. And then we like go find a tree. We're in the New Mexico desert. We find a tree. We're laying under this tree, and they like pull out their sleeping pads and like, well, we're going to drink some sodas, eat some ice cream, and then we're going to take a nap. And I'm like, just right here at the gas station. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess that's what we do. So I pull out my sleeping pad. People are pulling in, looking at you like, look at the homeless people. And
So
the problem, hold
it-
on. The problem is it's 11:30 in the morning, and we've only we've done our 60 miles. So they're like, well, we got here fast, so let's just keep going. John?
well, now you left us on a cliffhanger, so you have to continue with your story.
Okay, so we keep going, right? So we ride up this hill, and then it's supposed to be like 20 miles at like 1% grade downhill. So I'm like, this is going to be awesome. So we start cruising. We're hitting this downhill, and the headwind is just brutal. And so we're like having to pedal downhill. And I'm like, this is not awesome. Well, the next town is 40 miles away. So I'm like, that's 100-mile day on day one. That seems, a little extreme, but whatever. I'm following along. We make it like another 20 miles, and it's the going is getting tough. The wind is really blowing in our faces. So we're like, all right, let's start looking for a campsite. Well, there's no campsites. There's barbed wire fences on both sides of the road. So finally we see a spot where there is a gate into somebody's cow. I can't call it a pasture because it's in New Mexico. So it's like, the cows are eating cactus or something. I'm not sure. So we open this gate, and, of course it probably says no trespassing somewhere. So we go into the field and like lay our bikes in a ditch and then like lay down until the sun goes down before we set up our tents. And that was day one. I'm like, okay, I guess this is not what I expected it to be like. All the crashing, the dog attacking, sleeping in ditches. But, this is what we're going to do. So it was quite a shock right off the bat for me.
So you mentioned that it wasn't what you anticipated it being. I know I had talked to you ahead of time where it's like, yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're doing Route 66, correct?
Right. That's right.
Like we're doing historic Route 66. People think of that. You're like, oh, it's all these cool little towns, all these little awesome places to stop and scenic. And it's all these things, which I'm sure at times it was, but even that first day for you to realize like, oh, it's not all going to be this. How did you make that adjustment, or what adjustments did you have to make mentally to be like, hey, this isn't exactly what I expected, and how do I move forward? Like, how did you change your perspective about it, or how did that change the experience for you?
Yeah, it definitely made it harder. But man, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know that I ever did change my perspective on it. I think, cause I really struggled. I really struggled to, get to that 1,000-mile mark. In fact, I think if my wife would have picked me up earlier, I probably would have gone earlier. But and she was definitely my rock, I'd call her, and she'd be like, well, you just got to make it 1,000 miles and then you can be done. And I'd be like, oh, okay. There, I'm describing it and everything, sounds negative, but there were so many amazing times too. The next morning we rolled out of that cow field, and again, you're riding and the sun is coming up over the New Mexico desert, and it's amazing again. And we rode through Texas, and you've seen longhorns when you drive through, but when you ride past them, cows for some reason stop when bikes go by. They stop and they look. And so you're looking at these longhorns, and they're just such massive animals, and they're just staring at you, and you feel like, yeah, we're just kind of out here in nature, you and me, buddy, doing it together. So there's so many amazing things that are happening too, that, yeah, you're just kind of motivated to keep riding. And so there's both sides of it.
I think that's a pretty apt metaphor for life. I just see like Forrest Gump running, and the story of Forrest Gump is like, it's insane, and none of this would ever happen to a single individual, I guess. But then you think like he's just kind of keep on keeping on. He just has these like maxims to live his life with, and like that's how he goes about things. And I think as people, we kind of are on a journey, and we think it's going to be one thing, and then it becomes something else, and it morphs and it changes. And sometimes our perspective changes, and sometimes it's like, I just got to get to the end of this challenge or this adventure, and sometimes we don't see it as an adventure, and we start to miss the beauty in it, and I think that's, I kind of living vicariously through John as I was getting a few updates. You were talking to him a little bit, and it's like, how's it going? He's like, yeah, it's a mental grind, man. And yeah, that's life, that's absolutely life. But we don't see it that way because we don't have 1,000-mile endpoint or an aim point that is like, oh, once I get there, it'll change again. Like we actually get to choose when things change. We get to create like perspective change type moments. And sometimes it's really hard because I just got to get to the end of this, and then something else will change it for me, and so I think like I hear it and I'm just like, man, life. Like you tell this piece of the adventure, and it's like, that's just one day, but that's a microcosm of life. You wake up and you're like, I'm ready to attack this thing, and it's going to be great. And then you experience tremendous beauty and awe, and then 5 minutes later, somebody crashes. Like and it's just, sorry for kind of romanticizing, like in a literary way, this idea, but I think it's true. I think that's how life happens. And so,
and I want to bring attention, because again, you did call me a couple of times along the way, and there's two things that I think are really valuable that you worked through, and I don't know if you've processed how you got through it or not, but one of them was, you called me and you said, hey, what do I do if I don't want to get on my bike tomorrow? Like, I just don't want to get on my bike tomorrow. And the second was kind of talking through the experience where I know you guys rode through some rain. And I mean, I hate rain in general, let alone trying to, bring along camping gear and food and transport myself from point A to point B that's 100 miles away in the pouring rain the entire day. Like, I just don't know how I would handle that, but clearly you worked through those things. What did you use, or how did you get through, the idea of, I don't want to get on my bike tomorrow? And then like going through the rain, there must've been some mental battles that you fought throughout the day or the whole day.
Yeah, I think definitely there was some nights where I would lay down in my tent and just be like, man, I don't want to get on my bike tomorrow. And honestly, you sleep and you wake up, and it just has to be a new day. And every day was a new day. And that sounds so corny, but it's so true. Of, you would get up you're refreshed. You sleep pretty good when you ride your bike for 12 hours a day. Even if you're sleeping in a tent on the ground, you're just like, yeah, you're sleeping good. So even the night we were in the ditch, it was fine. So you wake up refreshed, and you just have to put whatever happened the day before. If it was a hard day, if it was an easy day, it doesn't matter, because that day is, it's going to present its own set of challenges, and it's also going to present its own set of experiences that you don't want to miss. So you have to just treat it as a new day. And so that night of sleep, you get refreshed and you get up. And for me, the mornings were easy. I loved riding in the morning from 6 till lunchtime. There was nowhere in the world I would have rather been than on my bike with the people I was with. And it was great. And then, for me, the afternoons were a grind. They'd start to get hot, or it wouldn't get hot because it was raining. But yeah, just treat it as a new day and a new challenge, and be ready to take it on, whatever might be coming. And again, like, sorry, phone dropped. Like we talked about, it is kind of cheesy, but it is like life, and you do have to treat it like a new day. And that was something that you got pretty used to, and just kind of shaking off the day before whatever happened, and keep going.
Well,
but we definitely, yeah, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say our most recent episode with Jake Thompson, his business is compete every day, right? And it's like, that's what I hear you saying is like, hey, every day I get up, I have new opportunity for experiences, to learn about myself, to learn and see and experience things that I don't even know it's out there, but there's an opportunity here. So refresh, restart it, go attack it. So anyway.
Yeah. And then we had some, one day in particular, we got up in the morning and it was raining. So we left the hotel. We had stayed in a hotel the night before. Probably I was about 50-50 hotels and camping. So we stayed in a hotel, and because it was raining that night, got up. It's still raining at 5:30 in the morning or whatever it was. And we start pedaling through the rain, and we make it about a mile down the road, and I get a flat tire. So now we're changing a tire in the rain, and then kept pedaling. And I don't know what, my tires had just got worn out. I definitely didn't have the right tires. But I ended up getting 8 flat tires that day, and it rained all day. So, and it was like the water was starting to puddle up on the road. So you're like riding through puddles, and then there's like roadkill, and then the person in front of you is spraying water on your face, and you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm eating roadkill right now. And so that was a tough day. And I know, at one point I kind of felt like I was just ready to throw my arms up and be like, this is ridiculous. 8 flat tires. It won't stop raining. But the way I dealt with it, and this certainly doesn't work for everybody, but like the way I cope with things is through humor. Like there's a joke there somewhere, with 8 flat tires and it's raining all day. And so you have to laugh about it. Otherwise you're going to be completely miserable. And actually, one of the things I've always loved humor. And as you guys know, at one point last night, I was actually crying because John and I were laughing so hard. And so like, that's always been a big part of my life. But I think it was this trip that really made me realize that it's also it's a coping mechanism for me. Like when you have to choose of how you're going to feel about something that's going on in your life. And one of your options is to just, there was nothing I could do about it. I mean, I suppose I could have quit, but so you might as well laugh and joke about it. And that's what we did that day. And I know it was tough. I'm not trying to say it was just all, funny all day long, but there were some jokes made that really got you through those toughest moments where you're like, well, I'm going to stop and change another one. And then I did the next morning have to take a taxi 17 miles to the next town, Joplin, Missouri, to get some new tires put on the bike so I could continue riding. So that was like my day where that was probably the hardest day for me, was just getting through all those flats and being like, what is happening? And I think we still rode 80 miles that day with 8 flat tires. So if you can imagine, getting a flat tire every 10 miles, that's how our day went.
And it's still possible to get somewhere. It's still possible to achieve something pretty incredible. Like 80 miles for most people is, holy cow, I could never do that. And you're like, yeah, I had a flat every 10 miles along the way too, like on top of it. And
it's raining.
Yeah. And so I think we need to just frame things sometimes that, oh yeah, this is possible. One of the things I laughed about, and is probably not something that you were laughing about at the time, is John told me about the end of your trip. And, there was some doubt about when you were going to get picked up or how you're going to get picked up, if you're going to have to ride some more. You want to explain a little bit of that?
Yeah. I think this is a good point to introduce everybody into my vehicle. We've been talking about the short bus. So, I drive a 2003 E350 short bus that has been converted into an RV. So my wife is spending time with my family up in Michigan, and she was like, well, I'm going to join you for the last few days, and I'll take your gear in the bus, and you can just pedal along till you get to your 1,000 miles. And I was like, that sounds amazing. No heavy stuff. Oh, and then I was going to sleep in the bus. It has a wonderful queen size bed. It's got heat. It's got water. It's awesome. So I was like, oh man, no more sleeping in the rain. My wife's coming down. I was the happiest kid in the world. And so she leaves our hometown, and she makes it about 50 miles before the bus breaks down. And so she's like, she calls me up. She's like, hey, I'm not coming to get you. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, the bus broke down. It's at the mechanic. Your dad's coming to pick me up. I'm not coming to get you. And I'm like, no. I was so upset. Like, I was just like, no. She's like, what's the big deal? You were going to keep riding anyway. I'm like, but I was going to sleep in the bus, and like, you were going to be there, and like everything. And she's like, well, that's just how it is. And I'm like, that was hard. That was so hard for me, because I thought, like, as far as the tough stuff, sleeping in the rain and all that stuff, carrying the gear, I thought it was over. I thought I was going to see her that night. And she's like, nah, you got at least 2-3 more days. Okay. So, yep. So I had to keep going. And then you referenced Forrest Gump, where he's running, and then just one day he stops running. That's almost exactly what the end of the trip felt like for me. I was in Cuba, Missouri. I knew I had hit my 1,000 miles that day. And so I was just kind of, I was on my own at that point, because the other two were going to keep going. And by the way, they traversed the whole country. I think it took them 48 days. It's so amazing. So I get to Cuba, Missouri, and I pull up to this hotel days in, and, I look nasty, and I roll my bike into the lobby, and the lady's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm riding my bike. She's like, from where did you come from? And I'm like today or at the start? She's like, from the start. I'm like, well, I came from Santa Fe, New Mexico. She just looked at me and just goes, what? I'm like, I know, it's about 1,000 miles from here. And she's like, huh, okay, where are you going? And it was just like the strangest thing, because I go, here. And she's like, what do you mean here? And I'm like, I rode into the parking lot, and I'm done. She's like, here in Cuba, Missouri? I'm like, yeah. She's like, why? I'm like, because that's 1,000 miles. And she's like, well, okay. Do you have a reservation? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, we should probably upgrade your room. So she upgraded my room because it was my last day. And then there were mice in the hotel. So there's mouse poop in the bed. That wasn't ideal. I'm like, man, I've slept in cow fields, all this stuff, and then I get upgraded to a mouse poop room. Come on.
Well, I think, that just that last story about you thought you were done. You thought it was done. Your wife is coming to pick you up. How often does that happen to us in our lives? Whether it's at work, at school, wherever. It's like, oh, this project is going to be done. We're working toward, Jamie, you talked about it a little bit ago. Like we have that end, that 1,000 miles, that deadline, that whatever. And then all of a sudden something happens and that's not the end. We got to figure out how to keep going and make the adjustments, right? And I think that's the ability to laugh at it and say, hey, these are the circumstances. It's beyond my control. You had no control over your wife and the bus breaking down, but you had the option then to be upset about it and pout and complain, or keep going and find an incredible experience in Cuba, Missouri, it sounds like.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think I reflect on that and know that, man, I could have handled all of that so much better, because I did. I was upset and I was, was a little pouty. And I think, we have to put ourselves in these situations, because then I rode for 2 or 3 more days. It really turned out to be some really nice riding, and I wouldn't want to give those days up, and I wouldn't. And so, you have to learn and grow from those experiences. And sometimes you have to have the unexpected happen for yourself to be able to grow a little bit. And so, now that it's done, I'm glad it happened that way.
Well, and it speaks to the power of our expectations, right? Our expectations lend so much of the frame for how we experience things. And so if our expectations aren't met, it feels like a negative, even though now in reflection, you can look back and say, okay, had I not had this experience, I wouldn't know this about myself. And it's actually, I'm better for it. And so I don't know, I've had those experiences in travel. Specifically when I'm traveling, I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for this. And it maybe doesn't live up to it. And then there's other times where I travel, I'm like, it's just going to be this like long weekend where we're doing all this stuff and it blows your mind. And so I don't know, I think power expectation is a big deal. So
Absolutely.
So Tom, we could talk for a long time about the bike ride. There's a lot there, but I want to get to your next adventure, because I don't even know that people realize that. I mean, you went on a 1,000-mile bike ride, and then what'd you do most recently as far as your extreme adventure, putting yourself out there to a spot where you get to learn about yourself and what your makeup is?
Yeah. So then, I got home and spent some time with the family, and then pretty much ended my summer, July 24th. We set off on a private Grand Canyon rafting trip. So we got to raft the Grand Canyon 16 days, and it was pretty much everything opposite of what the bike trip was. It was, the weather was perfect. Somebody asked me, like, okay, for 16 days, something had to get hard or, annoying, or you wanted it to end for something, maybe not for a whole day, but there had to be something. And I just know we had 16 of the best days. It was just absolutely incredible. So it was a 16-person group. This is something, the group of people that I raft with, we've been putting in for years to try to get one of these permits, and I got one. So we've been planning this trip for a year and a half, and then it was looking like it might get shut down. The Grand Canyon shut down due to COVID, and June 15th, we got an email that said, canyon is opening back up, and we will honor your permit if you want it, but you can cancel and take one in 2022. We decided not to cancel, and kind of risk it. And it turned out to be such an incredible decision, because I think a lot of people had canceled their trips. And so we had this whole, it felt like we had the whole river to ourselves, because there was a lot less groups on than I think normally put on. And it was, I mean, to put it in a word, it's powerful. The experience was powerful. The, the river and the views and everything you take in was powerful. And I was talking to my friend Stefan, who was the one who rowed in my boat with me. We had 2 people per boat, and we were just discussing what made it so powerful. And I think it was, you're so remote out there that there's nothing to do other than to be present. If you're having a conversation with somebody, you're there. There are no distractions. Nobody has a phone. There's no business to think about. There are no other groups coming by. There's nothing to do but be present with the river, with the canyon, and with the 16 people that you're with. So it was an incredible trip.
So I was listening to a podcast recently, the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast, and he had a guest on, Michael Hyatt, and he said, we don't, like, when we live on purpose, we live with intention, we don't drift, right? And Jake Thompson, our last guest, talked about this slow fade to things. And like, life is kind of a slow fade. You don't slow fade into a Grand Canyon trip. You talked about applying for a permit and doing all these things, but you also don't slow fade into having all this opportunity to have these adventures that you talk about. I think a lot of people might go, oh, well, Tom's life is different than mine, because he goes on, he can take 13 days and go on a 1,000-mile bike trip. He can take 16 days and go on a Grand Canyon trip. Like, how do you build some purposeful intention into your life, financially, planning, scheduling, with your relationship with your family, and all these things that allow for you to do these things that are obviously like a part of your heart? Like, this is an opportunity for me to grow as a human being and to be a better dad, to be a better husband, to be a better teacher. And I really value these things. How do you make it happen? Because there are a lot of people that don't make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, you guys had a podcast pretty early on about being intentional. I think people, you put together these lists of things that you want to do, or people tell me all the time after we do something, whether that's the Grand Canyon or we sailed to the Bahamas or and all kinds of lots of different things, maybe the bike ride. People say, man, it's always been a dream of mine. Okay, so do it. And it sometimes it's as simple as that. The Grand Canyon, people say all the time, man, that is my dream trip. Well, have you ever put in a permit? No. It costs $25. Like, financially, the Grand Canyon is not it's not a huge commitment. However, we as a family, we value experiences, and we know that. And so that is kind of reflected in our lifestyle. We live in a small house, and we live in a 2-bedroom house. It's myself, my wife, my niece has now moved in with us because she's going to college in our town. And it doesn't bother us that our house is small. That's not what brings us joy. I drive a school bus, and my wife drives an old Trailblazer. So we don't have car payments. We spend our money with our experiences, and we have talked about it. We're intentional about it. We know that is what we value, and that's what brings us the most joy in life. And then as far as, the tough one is, and, for somebody who maybe doesn't know me and is listening to this, and they're like, this guy rode 13 days and then turned around a month later and went out for 16 days. Like, yeah, I spent, over a month away from my family this summer, and that's a ton of time. It's a ton of time when you have a kid. But like you said, I do think it makes me a better person. It makes me a better dad, better teacher. And the other thing is we spend an incredible amount of time together. We're a pretty tight family. And so you have to put in that time with each other to feel okay about being away for that kind of time. And, and I do, I feel okay about it, because when we are together, we we try to be present. I think we are present. And I was trying to think this morning of, that is a lot of time that we spend out. Like we're just talking about what our next month looks like, and we're just jam packed with things to do. And somebody said to me, like, man, you guys are always going. Like, I don't know how you could do it. And I thought about it. Well, what do we not do that other families do and other people do? What do we cut out? And I can't think of anything really that we cut out, other than, besides watching a football or a hockey game here and there. We don't watch TV. And it's just not because we hate TV. We just don't have time. And so those are the things that we cut out, I think. But other than that, I think we do, we're a pretty normal family, other than John shaking his head. Maybe normal's not the right term. But yeah, we put in the time together so we can do the things that we love.
I think you said intentionality, right? You guys, and we had this conversation a couple of days ago when we were sitting out on the lake. It's like you decide you want to do something, and then there's just no excuses as to why not to do it. You figure it out. Like, yes, there are time restraints. Yes, there are financial commitments and things that I'm going to give up because of that. But ultimately, you come up with these things that you want to do and experience, and you do them either as a family or individually, but you just don't make excuses about why you can't do it, right? I think that's so often what happens to people is like, oh, that's my dream, but they don't take any action. They don't. And Jamie, that's a couple of episodes where you talked about movement, which is oh yeah, that's my dream. I want to do that. That goes on my list. Like, that is movement around this thing, but there's never any action toward putting in a permit. There's never any action toward, buying a bus to live a certain lifestyle, right? One of the things that I love about my wife, and we were talking about this exact thing, is she's like, when I put something on my list, it means I'm going to do it. Like, there isn't just this list out there of like, this is my bucket list, and maybe I'll get to these things someday. No, if it goes on the list, we start making preparations to do it. It might not be tomorrow. It might be 2 years from now. It might be 5 years from now. But if you put something on your list, figure out how to do it and take steps to get there. We talk about taking steps every day. Does it get you closer to what you want to do, or are you just moving?
And I have witnessed, yes, John, you're right. Your wife is the champion of this. Like, when she says something, it's gonna happen. That's true. But I've been watching it. You guys are also living this. You're not just talking about it. I was on the sailboat when you two were talking that this was something you were going to do. And I know I was a little late, like you guys had already been talking about it, but you took the steps, and all of a sudden you start this podcast, you start this whole idea. And it's been amazing to watch you guys put it into, it was more than words or ideas on paper. It's action that you guys took, and it's impressive.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And most of the credit goes to my wife for that. I mean, I certainly play a role in that, but most of the drive comes from her. The other thing that I was thinking about, Tom, when I was thinking about all these different adventures that you go on, or the things that you kind of jump into, right? you don't always know what you're getting into, but something that I admire is that there's always something that you're learning or you're picking up that builds towards something else usually. For example, you bought this bus. You knew some about diesel engines, but not a ton, right? And
Yeah, I'd say very little is what I'm learning now.
right, but like you use that as an opportunity instead of it being like, I don't know anything. Someone else is going to have to figure this out. You started researching it and educating yourself. And then you're like, oh, and if I do this thing, it makes, if I want to be on a sailboat someday, those also take diesel engines, right? That's a skill that I'm now building that builds to further experiences or adventures. And I'm sure that's true of, the bike ride and the Grand Canyon. Like, there are skills that you're building with these experiences and these adventures that allow you to broaden what is possible for you in the future.
I think it goes beyond that even. It's not just a skill set that's being built. I think it's the way that we think. Like the more you do something, the more you take action, the more it shapes your thought process around the next action that's similar to it, because you feel competent, going back to Rob, you feel competent and confident that I've done this before and I can do it again. And now my frame of reference, my mindset is eyes up, for lack of a better term, to go walk through the door on this thing. I'm gonna do this with passion and with intention, and let's go. And I used to have a coach that I worked with say life's about choices. Life is about choices, and you choose. Like, you're an athlete, you want to be great, choose to be great. Do the thing, put it on your list, and get it done. If you want to be a great student, be a great student. If you want to go on an adventure, figure out a way to do it. It's not as hard as we think it is, And Tom, you talk about being on the sailboat with us, the two of us, even as we talk about maybe someday we'll have a podcast, maybe someday we'll have a business. Like, what is it going to look like? And that's in Croatia. Like, we were in the Adriatic Sea having that conversation. And what was that? It was a couple of years of planning for me and my wife to say we're going to be in Europe. John, when you guys found out you had a different life circumstance on your way, you're like, let's do this thing. It's a couple months of planning. It's a little bit more upfront, but the payoff is huge.
It's been a long time. I know you've been processing and thinking, and you said a little bit intimidated by all of our, famous guests, but I think you bring incredible value to us individually, but also to our listeners. So I'm wondering if you have a challenge for the listeners today based on something we've talked about today, or, just something that you think is valuable and a challenge for them to take forward from our conversation.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something. I listened to a quote, and I will happily misquote it, and I can't remember who said it. So, but I'm sure somebody out there knows who said this. It was something along the lines of, he who is not willing to learn cannot be helped, but he who is determined to learn cannot be stopped. And so if you have something on your list, that thing that just seems like something that other people do, other people go and do this thing or do that, that's bull crap. If it's on your list, it's on there for a reason. And so learn what you need to learn, figure out how to do it. And at some point you just gotta jump in and make it happen.
You're not going to do.
Also, just one other quick thing. Rob Lovejoy, if you're listening to this and you're taking applications for a best friend, I would love to submit an application, because I thought your podcast was incredible. So, get a hold of me. John will get you. Just talk to my people, John, and he'll get you my contacts, and I'll whatever, if you need a resume or anything. And then, yeah, John, do you mind if I sign off?
By all means.
All right, people. In a world that tries to keep your head down, don't forget, Live eyes up.